Hello and welcome to this deep dive on blue energy, organized by the Blue Cluster within the GSTIC conference. And today we dig deeper into the energy activity. What is the role that the artificial structures can play for the energy function? For the moment, we see that energy islands are emerging in different forms. Why would we need them, and how can they potentially contribute to a sustainable blue economy? Even though artificial islands have been and still are quite controversial, they are popping up now as important contributors to a carbon-neutral society. Artificial blue-green energy islands could act as power hubs, and they have served several communities and countries. Floating islands and renewable energy could fulfill the promise to ensuring access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy for all. And they could support bringing together powerful partnerships and facilitate connections across diverse sectors. So today we will showcase some examples of energy islands. We will start with 3 presentations and a ministerial keynote brought to you by the Belgian Federal Minister for Energy, Ms. Tine van der Straten. The session will be closed by a panel discussion. And for this panel discussion, we do need your input from home as well. So go to slido.com and enter the code 243208. During the presentations, you can already fill in the word clouds. What, in one word, is an energy island for you? And if you have any burning questions, you can ask them in the Q&A section, and maybe your question will be picked up during the panel discussion. So now it's time to introduce to you the first speaker. The first speaker is Mr. Jan Corneli. He's an environmental economist who is trained in Leuven, Oxford and London. And he's a team manager, strategy and policy at the renewable energy technology firm 3E, helping customers to align their actions with the 10-year developments in renewable energy. 3E's strategy and policy team is looking into the integration of renewable energy technologies in order to realize the smart renewable energy systems that are needed for a net zero world. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome all of you. I'm delighted to speak today about this topic of energy island, which is definitely one of the 10-year ahead developments in renewable energy. And I titled my presentation, Energy Islands for the People or Islands for the Energy People. And with that, I will want to start the discussion, which we will continue in the panel, by raising some questions about how the energy islands fit into the energy system and how they can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, as you mentioned, I'm an environmental economist, and I'm honored and privileged to work with around 100 engineers who are active in the domain of renewable energy, mainly solar and wind. And in our firm, we work worldwide in more than 100 countries, and we've been active on more than 90 gigawatt of installed capacity on solar and wind. And so when working in these projects worldwide of solar and wind development, obviously some important questions about the impact on the energy system pop up. And that's where we have been active in the past, and we also have some reflections to share going forward in the future. So my presentation will be structured in 4 short blocks. First, I will look back to some of the developments that have happened in the last 10 years. Then I will look forward on what is going on right now and why we see the idea of energy islands emerging. And then I will ask the question, well, these energy islands, these artificial structures in the sea, are these energy islands for the people, or are these the toys of energy people, islands for the energy people to amuse themselves with, but without perhaps much relevance for the wider energy system? And so that will be the start of the debate, which I hope you will participate in on the Slido with the questions and with the excellent panelists we have here. So when I look back, on artificial energy islands, well, with 3E, we've actually been, in the last 6 years, very active in the field. We've done a study in 2015 on the North Sea grid, where we identified important connections between the North Sea countries, linking these countries and their offshore wind developments in the North Sea. And there, we concluded back in 2015 that these integrated infrastructure projects are beneficial to all the countries around the North Sea, and so to the electricity system in continental Europe, in Northwest Europe. And so we are delighted to see that in the meantime, all these connections have been built between the UK and Belgium, between Germany and Denmark, between Norway and the UK, Norway and the Netherlands. So we see that connecting the countries, the offshore wind countries of the North Sea, is beneficial, and developers have acted on it and have put these infrastructures in place. In 2018, we did a study on the value streams of an energy atoll, and it was an artificial energy island with a pumped storage system integrated into it. And the idea was that when there's no wind, we could let the water run through the turbines and create electricity to offset the lack of wind. And when there's too much wind, then we could pump up this water in this artificial island. We looked at the value streams of the solar PV installed on the island, the offshore wind around it, and the pumped storage. And unfortunately, at that moment, we found that the revenue streams were insufficient to commercialize such a project of an artificial energy atoll. And I say at that moment because obviously prices change. The energy market changes, the energy system changes, and so we have to do this calculation again and again in different circumstances. I'm not saying by that at the moment, if you would do the calculations, you might come up with a commercially viable structure. And then last year, we did a study on the LCOE of offshore wind in the new to be created Princess Elizabeth zone in the Belgian North Sea. And there also we looked at, well, whether an energy island connecting all the energy from the whole offshore wind zone, bringing it to the shore, would actually be beneficial as compared to a scenario where each of the lots would be connected straight with a cable to the shore. And there we find indeed that for bigger capacities, over 3 gigawatt, that indeed an energy island would actually be cheaper than connecting the different lots apart to the shore. And so this is also an important conclusion which adds to the thinking about artificial energy islands in the sea. Now, if we look forward, where does that leave us? Well, an important development, and we've seen even in the last days some enormously interesting cases of that. Going forward, we see that the offshore wind is being developed at capacities that we've never seen before. The Scottish Crown Estates have announced 25 gigawatt of projects in the seas around Scotland, which are known to be some of the most advantageous sites for offshore wind. And so we see that this EU offshore wind strategy and the UK offshore wind strategy are pushing to capacities 60 gigawatt by 2030, 300 gigawatt by 2050. We see that floating offshore is also increasing the potential of having even more offshore wind, even in sites where the sea is deeper. And obviously this creates connection challenges. And the question is, how will we bring all this competitive commercial offshore wind from the North Sea onshore to the UK and to Europe? And so this is really the challenge where energy islands can come in. And a second development that we're seeing which might help the business case of energy islands is that obviously with all this renewable energy coming on stream, also the PV on the land and floating PV, is that the need for flexibility and storage is increasing. So the business model there is also increasing because we see that curtailment, imbalance cost, negative prices are all increasing because of the intermittency. It's a well-known phenomena. But as we are moving to an energy system which is dominant in renewable energy, we see that these effects become bigger, more frequent, and so we need solutions for them. And so these impacts, together with the fact that the cost of these flexibility services, whether it's demand, whether it's batteries, whether it's hydrogen production at peak times and so forth, all these flexibility assets and services, the cost of them are also coming down. And so this is actually adding momentum to this business case. And then a third development that we're seeing is that with the hydrogen strategy and the aim to replace fossil gas and and oil and coal by hydrogen in industrial uses or in hard-to-abate sectors, we see that, well, if we want this European renewable hydrogen production to kick off, we would require substantive amounts of offshore wind energy to be brought to the land or brought to an electrolyzer on the sea. And so this is a third development 10 years ahead, which will lead to the demand or the business case for energy islands going forward. So then the question then is, well, what does this energy island actually have to do? And so when you look at it from the perspective of the energy system and the idea that we're moving to a dominant, even 100% renewable electricity system, which has to be cheap, which has to be reliable, which has to be affordable for the customers, well, then we're moving actually from building single assets, an offshore wind farm, a solar PV park, a standalone battery, to system assets. And that's where I think we are moving into a new territory where you cannot just say, oh, I make my business case, I put in some offshore wind, then how this impacts on the energy system on the continent, that's not my business. No, this will be integrated into the thinking of the developers, also by the fact that the prices, imbalance prices and others, will reflect that. So we need to look at the system, and in that system, as said, flexibility, supply and demand is the real game. That's really what can bring cheap, reliable, affordable renewable electricity to the European customers. And we see that, from an energy island perspective, we see that actually the real islands with real people are experimenting with that, because the non-interconnected islands, well, they're a closed shop, they're a closed energy system, and they have to, experiment with that flexibility. If they want to move from the petrol and the coal that they are using to the solar and the wind around these islands, they have to solve these questions. And we see actually very interesting perspectives on how you can flexibly use such an energy system. So the real energy islands with real people are already showing us some of the solutions. But obviously, what goes for a small island in non-interconnected island might not go for the whole of Europe. So in the end, the balancing of the whole European energy system has to be done at a very large scale with sufficient interconnections. You don't balance at home. You don't even balance on an individual country, as we are seeing right now in the energy crisis. We have to balance at the European level. And so then the question becomes, okay, if an artificial energy island can help in that, why would we do that balancing in the sea? That's an important question to ask. It can help, we know that, but can it is the business case of such an island positive? So in the end, we want these artificial energy islands to perform these flexibility services and also to, by doing that, deliver or contribute to cheap, reliable, affordable energy for European customers and, in the end, worldwide. And so that's where the question of, well, if we look at some of the designs of these energy islands, then the question is, well, is this actually the solution? I mean, if our goal is this affordable and reliable renewable energy system, well, do these designs then add up to that? And there, I sometimes observe what I call the Swiss knife conundrum. I mean, we see also on this picture different functions. We see interconnections, we see storage, we see docking stations for service vessels, for the O&M industry. We see many things on one island. And then the question is, yes, you can integrate that just like in a Swiss knife. All these functions can be integrated in a tiny piece of artificial island. But this artificial island, the best in performing all of these functions? That's not clear, because perhaps for every of these functions, there might be a better or a cheaper alternative on land, closer to the offshore wind stations or so. And that's really the question we need to ask. If we are conceiving these artificial energy islands, what functions do we want them to perform? as said in the presentation in the beginning, connecting the power from all these offshore wind islands is definitely beneficial. Adding storage, hydrogen production, service industry, all these things might be beneficial, but it has to really be calculated, and it has to be seen in the context of the offshore wind parks and others that it wants to connect, because it's not guaranteed. It's an empirical thing. It's something you need to verify. And then the second element that I ask myself around these artificial energy islands, because, you know, okay, we are used now to seeing offshore wind turbines, huge parks in the North Sea, in other seas, and we've seen that in terms of the impact for the environment and so forth, this can actually be unproblematic, even beneficial at some times. Now, these islands are a bigger piece of infrastructure with a lot of elements, with a lot of infrastructure materials that are poured into a piece of the sea. And so there the question, if we step back from this energy island, is it's a general question for infrastructure. The infrastructure that we put in place for greening the electricity system, is it also a green electricity infrastructure? Because the cement that we're using, the steel that we're using, is this actually all low carbon materials, or is this actually very heavy carbon materials that we're pouring into a piece of sea? So there we need to see, can we actually transition to renewable energy while at the same time transitioning to circularity and low carbon materials? That might add to the cost, but it would in the end be, let's say, a fair proposition for a completely decarbonized electricity system where also the infrastructure elements are circular and renewable. And so, again, same for the whichever way you look at it, whether you look at it from marine spatial planning, whether you look at it from material circularity, whether you look at it from the taxonomy in terms of financing these infrastructures, you will need to show that you do not do substantial harm and that you integrate material circularity, renewable low carbon materials into your system. And so there, again, it's a question of doing the analysis. And that's an analysis, I think, that island per island will need to be done to show this is beneficial. We're not creating something worse, impacting negatively on the environment in order to green the electricity system. No, we're doing both at the same time. And that's, I think, what should be the challenge. And that's where the energy people, with whom I work, so with nothing negative here, are coming up with the solutions to that. The engineers are looking, civil and others, are looking into how we can make these islands work for the benefit of the people in terms of affordable and reliable energy, but also in terms of infrastructure, doing this in a way that fits best into our seas and into our oceans and can be reproduced in many places of the world. I will leave it there, and I'm looking forward to a great debate after the other presentations.
Thank you, Jan, for the interesting views on energy islands. And for the viewers at home, if you have any questions for Jan, please do log in at slido.com using the code 243208 and do share your one word, what is an energy island for you? So now we are looking at the second presentation for today. And we move on to Timothy van Acht. Timothy has graduated as a commercial engineer marketing at KU Leuven. And his master's thesis was an optimization model for the real estate sector. After that, he went to the Technical University of Delft for civil engineering and architect, and he even topped it up with a garden and landscape architecture study. So we have someone with a lot of degrees here. Timothy previously worked on large-scale projects for the Kruibeekse polder and the Sigma Nature and Inundation Works. For the Belgian viewers, you will probably know what that is about. And for ORG, Timothy recently completed the Design for Public Value at Sea project, which was a project funded by the Flemish government and supported by the Blue Cluster, of course, as well. A little bit of publicity can't harm. So the Design for Public Value at Sea is a co-creation methodology to realize large-scale infrastructure in seas and oceans worldwide. And for the moment, Timothy is implementing this methodology within the Kustvisie project, which is a co-creation strategy to protect the Belgian coastline against a 3-meter sea level rise. Timothy strongly believes that a transdisciplinary approach is the key to a world of tomorrow. Timothy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christine. Thanks for the introduction. What I think is interesting about Christine's introduction is not the fact that I did a few studies, but let's say what I learned from it is to look at a certain topic or a task from different points of view, or let's say from different perspectives. And that's what I like to use as a starting point for the discussion that I will bring today. And I'd like to continue upon a question that was raised in the previous presentation, which was about the Swiss knife and what energetic functions could be integrated on an island. Should we integrate them all, yes or no? I would like to take that a step further. And let's say I would even like to question, and I'll explain you right away the necessity of it, that we maybe should integrate even functions of other stakeholders. I'm thinking of aquaculture people, ecologists, tourism and recreations, to get these necessary islands. I'm not questioning that these are necessary, they are definitely necessary, but to get them realized. And that's the topic of my presentation. How to get these necessary islands, these necessary functionalities, how to get them realized. Before I kick off, let's say, I would like to start with a statement, or let's say the result of a study done by Professor Hertog at the TU Delft, who came to the conclusion that large-scale infrastructures, that only one in three get realized. This means that 66% of all these large-scale infrastructure, in this case necessary infrastructures, do not reach the realization stage. And the reason is, that comes out of his research, is that these projects seldomly or do not take, they are technically and financially well underpinned, as we heard in the previous presentation, but they do not take, or they do not take stakeholder engagement too seriously. So research has shown, if you want your complex project realized, take stakeholder engagement seriously and integrate stakeholder concerns and wishes into your project, and this from an early stage. The reason why this might be necessary for these islands we're discussing today is that, okay, they will be literally built in sea, but as we all know here, and everybody present here and everybody listening, these islands will also be built within a sea of stakeholders. I will give you name a few. We got, of course, the fishermen. We got the ecologists that were already named in the previous presentation. I mentioned aquaculture people, marine forces, etc. There's a multitude of stakeholders active within these seas, and let's say we're looking with a curiosity, but with a goodwill as well, to these necessary projects. And of course, knowing this, it is, and if we see there are a few projects that are on the horizon, let's say, we've got the Denmark Islands that will come in a minute, I guess. There is a new island to be built, at least that's what I learned from the press in Belgium. There are some plans to restructure formal oil platforms. Knowing that only 33% of these projects get realized, it's of course crucial to get on the positive side of these statistics. And that is the reason. That's the reason why of my presentation today. Designing the energy island is more like how do we get them realized, and how do we take, and that's by just taking stakeholder management seriously and integrating them in early stages of projects. I'll take you through three topics as an architecture and urban development office situated in Brussels and New York. We are also active in the field of systems. This means that since recently we opened a department, or we started a department, looking at large-scale transformative projects and how we can help realize them. So I'll first go into, let's say, the strategic parameters on how we think large-scale projects should be tackled, engaging stakeholder management. Secondly, I'll go into a tool we recently developed called Solve, which is, let's say, an algorithm to define the optimum project definition in this case for an island, to make it successful, to make it built. And then thirdly, I'll go into the results of design for public value at sea that Christine recently just introduced. And what I think is interesting about that project, but I'll reintroduce it later on, is when you engage stakeholders and not only look at it from keeping the core of an energy island, naming its energetic functions, how it could transform, how it could, let's say, how its look and its design could alter if you take other perspectives into account. One of the first things we learned from to get large-scale project realized is the idea of joint fact-finding. So to all the designers, or let's say, and all the people engaged in creating energy islands, we would like to invite you in early stages to identify all the different stakeholders involved and to get them around the table from the very first moment. This means, let's say, we did this in Kustvisie, for example. We are now currently working with a group of 90 stakeholders, which we subdivided in different groups of, let's say, 40 to 50 people. We did the same in other projects on land. And these different stakeholders, they got all different points of view, different perspectives. As I said, we've got ecologists on the table, we got marine experts, we got people, sports people, water sports, recreation, marine forces are around the table. We got the different municipalities, etc., engaged. The interesting thing about it is that let's say, if you confront this with the old systems approach, which was typically top-down, coming from an engineering firm, or let's say from the contractors, a firm, a top-down approach, a top-down project, this is what we will realize. As I said at the beginning, these projects hardly or seldomly get realized. We need stakeholder engagement. And that's why we would like to invite you to go for this joint fact-finding. How we realize this within our projects and how you could realize it is within a typical process of let's say 1 to 2 years as a co-creation process for these large-scale projects, is to work with werkbanken. You invite these groups of experts which you have identified beforehand, and recurring every 2 months you bring these people together, you let them share their concerns, you let them share their knowledge, and you let them co-create the energy island we're all looking for. A second important element to be aware of, and that's very important, let's say, for contractors or let's say the builders of these islands, is that space is a generous medium and it's a big asset, which means that within space, and I'm going to maybe start with an example of a highway park. If it is well designed, a highway park can house a highway, it can house a park, it can be combined, let's say, with sports recreation, with leisure, with horeca, dog fields, etc. So this means that this necessary infrastructure, this highway, got realized, or let's say got integrated within a highway park, tackling different narratives and integrating different points of view, different opinions by the different stakeholders. You could translate this idea to energy islands, as I said, a sea of stakeholders. What could an energy island, apart from being an energetic infrastructure, be more than the energy infrastructure? And be aware, it is an asset, the space you have. And thirdly, we see as a result of this joint fact-finding, let's say this co-creative approach, we see as key to success that the plan, which is these energy islands, that they're not coming from a top-down approach, let's say by the genius of the architect or a very smart engineer, and I do respect him, by the way, but that we see that what leads to the best results and to get into this 1/3 of realized projects is that projects should be the result of a co-creation process, and we name this a plan should be a social contract. What does it mean? By involving stakeholders from the very first moment, by means of joint fact-finding, for example, within werkbanken. You get stakeholders to integrate their concerns, their wishes, their ideas, so that in the end they even become ambassadors of the project, and they will even sustain and support the project throughout its entire lifespan. That is what a social contract is about. How do we do this, or how could this be done? A few pictures of projects we have been doing on land over the ring, which is a capping of the ring road around Antwerp. Here you see how these joint fact-finding sessions are in action. It's around a model, sharing knowledge, getting knowledge, co-designing, co-creating. The same, we can take this not only within this smaller group of direct stakeholders, this group of 40, 50 to 100 people, but we can enlarge this to the larger public, so that, let's say, in the end, energy islands will be built in our biggest public domains, which is the sea, which are oceans. So it is most likely that a broader public will have an opinion or a view on these energy islands as well. So a need to engage them as well to get your project realized. So what we see, and I think this is an interesting slide. What you see on the left-hand side is in orange, or the left-hand side. I'm sorry, I'm not good at the right and left. Is the project in the middle, an orange dot, and all around you see its stakeholders. What you see in the middle are the fixed elements that a project should contain. In this case, we are talking about energy islands, so it should be its energetic functions. We could imagine as well, and it is arranged here from C to F, possible extra functionalities that we could integrate within these energy islands to get the bigger community, let's say all stakeholders active or all stakeholders involved, to get them support and realize in the end the energy island. As a result, you'll see that costs will go down as risks go down, and that the social benefits and the impact will grow thanks to the realization and support of the project. So these are for our office, let's say, the key parameters to get to success for large-scale projects, and in this case, energy islands. But you could as well imagine yourself, we're working within a vast field of stakeholders. As I said at the beginning, I used the word a sea of stakeholders. It's of course necessary how to get as quickly as possible to a common project definition, an optimum project definition that everybody from an early stage within a project can support. That is why we created, I think it was half a year ago, we launched it this year, or a few months ago, Solve with it, which is an algorithm that enables to identify in an early stage an optimal project definition to be supported by the different stakeholders, and that is in line with the wishes of the contractor, in this case, the energy market, for example. What does it do is that we, apart from, the first step is of course identifying the different stakeholders, and we're talking, let's say, maybe 80 to 100 people involved. What Solve allows us to do is to interview them and to look after the values these people have. What is important for you as a stakeholder? What are your values, and which value is important for you to be realized within a large-scale infrastructure, in this case within an energy island? All this happens transparently, objectively, it gets quantified, but what is interesting within this algorithm is that we predefined possible objects that could be integrated within, in this case, an energy island. These objects, for example, it could be floating aquaculture, it could be wind turbines, it could be recreational activities, it could be ecology, seals, what should we do for seals, what should we do for fauna, flora, etc. But attached to these project elements are values as well. So on the one hand, we've got stakeholders with values. On the other hand, we've got possible objects, projects that could be integrated with value. So the interesting part is how can we make these values come together? So when we can make them come together, we know what project or what combination of projects will be optimal for this group of stakeholders that we would like to answer to. So what does the algorithm do extra from this is what you see on the top of the slide is it maps the different stakeholders, and it groups them around their common values, creating, let's say, coalitions of the willing or maybe non-willing, or people who've got some questions regarding, in this case, an energy island. What you see here in the slide on top are two groups, left and right. What is interesting, and that is what I just said, what I previously said here, you got different objects with their values. We interviewed different stakeholders with different values. What if you bring it together? And what would that point be? The optimum a combination of objects, projects, within this field of values of stakeholders. And that is what Solve helps us to do. As I said at the beginning, by interviewing stakeholders, looking for their values, and by combining or integrating different possible projects with different values in the same field, we get to an optimum project definition, which, if I go back to the beginning of my presentation, where I said that 1 on 3 projects only get realized, so 2 on 3 don't get realized, 60%. In a preliminary stage of a project, you get all these wishes, you get these values integrated within your project. You're very likely to get to go through a successful process, leading to a cut in cost, which is profitable, of course, and leading to happy stakeholders. This brings, but I see I have 3 minutes left. I will use those 3 minutes to share with you one of the results of Design for Public Value at Sea. And what is more or less, or let's say what is interesting about this is what I said at the beginning, is we've got, if you look at, if I'm going to go back to this slide, if you look at the middle, A and B, let's say, as the fixed elements, the elements that should be definitely part of an energy island, the energetic elements the energetic functions that were mentioned in the previous presentation, and let's say the add-ons, the other projects that are necessary to get stakeholders support and to get the project realized. That is what you see within this slide. On the bottom, you see a possible example of an energy island. I'll go into that in a minute. What you see on top are a few components, as I explained previously, as within Solve we use components. We did the same within D4PV at Sea. So we've got a collection of different components that are appealing to different types of stakeholders. How can we combine them so that not only our energetic function of the island is guaranteed, but that we get stakeholder support as well? So we did an exercise for the large-scale storage of renewable energy, and I'll show you a few examples. If you guarantee the large-scale storage of renewable energy, what could the island look like? The energy island look like if you take other stakeholders' concerns into account as well. Here you see a large-scale storage which is of hydrogen, which is stored on the seabed. What you see here floating in red and green is, for example, floating solar panels, and aquaculture. Here you see an example of renewable energy stored within the core of a sandy island. In green, you see a whole range of aquaculture possibility, both on land and floating. In red, some energetic functions. And as you can see all around the island, there is ecology and there is space for recreation, for tourism and recreation. Another example could be that, let's say, this idea of starting from large-scale energy storage, we could fix from the beginning it should be hydrogen, but there are other ways of storing renewable energy. So let's say within our approach, we even tend to question this first statement. Should we immediately go for what we intended from the beginning? Hydrogen storage, for example, or could there be support for other types? If there wouldn't be support for hydrogen, your project is immediately stopped. Should we consider other types of storage of renewable energy as well? And these are a few other examples. Sea batteries is an innovative technique, protected by an island and a sandbank. Again, with floating solar panels, ecology, tourism, and recreation. And the pumped storage hydropower that was mentioned in the previous presentation, another way of storing and generating energy, again combined with different functionalities. And this brings me to my last slide. What I think, let's say, as a conclusion for the presentation I gave is, let's say, not only looking from the energetic perspective, but taking into account the opinions, perspectives of all the other stakeholders, which might lead us to a variety of energy islands instead of starting with one proposal. And in the end, and that's what we all want, which is necessary to get these necessary islands realized. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy, for the insightful presentation. And thank you for showing us that it's the importance of including the sea of stakeholders, as Timothy stated it so nicely. So now the time has come to move a bit more up north. We go all the way to Denmark and the Vindø project in the North Sea. So a warm welcome to Michael Ertman, who's coming all the way from Copenhagen to give us his insights on the Danish energy island concept. Michael Ertman is an associate partner in CIP, which is Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, and he is responsible for developing CIP's bid on the Danish North Sea Energy Island project. Vindø, it's called. Prior to joining CIP, Mr. Ertman held various senior management positions at Ørsted, which for most of you at home know is a leading utility within offshore wind. He holds a master's degree in economics from Copenhagen University, and he has completed several executive leadership programs and an executive MBA degree. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the chance to explain what we're doing out of Denmark. As said, my name is Michael Ertman. I'm associate partner in Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. The Danish state has announced 2 energy islands to be constructed. One artificial island in the North Sea, which CIP is looking at with our investors, and the other in the Baltic Sea on an existing island called Bornholm. And by the way, both these islands are supported by a broad majority in the parliament. I will in this presentation give a short presentation on our CIP's perspective on the energy island concept, and especially the Vindø project in the North Sea, our EPC partner, the Nord Group, and the view to what can happen globally on the energy island concept. CIP is a global fund management company focused on renewable energy infrastructure investments. The company was founded in 2012 by 4 senior executives from the energy sector, previous Dong, now Ørsted, and currently has over 16 billion euro in assets under management. Recently at COP26, CIP announced an ambition roadmap for accelerating its role in delivering on energy transition by aiming to deploy 100 billion euro by 2030. The company is headquartered in Copenhagen, Denmark, with over 250 employees in 7 offices across 5 continents. Thinking about offshore wind in a large scale quickly leads to a focus on the North Sea. The North Sea will be the European power center of carbon-free electricity with an estimated potential of around 180 to 200 gigawatt offshore wind capacity. This puts the Nordic countries in a unique position. When considering a future with significant offshore wind build-out, it needs to be seen in a larger context, i.e. holistic system view. We cannot afford to think about one wind farm at a time. Environmental impact will be reduced from systematic long-term planning of wind rather than multitude of connections to shore in an unconnected way. The energy island concept can be divided into 3 zones for different activities, and that is very much following what have been the discussion out of Denmark. There's a transmission zone, an area for establishing the technical installation, HVDC stations, which is typically owned by the TSO. In the case of Denmark, it's the energy net. There's a flexibility zone. It can be an area for additional HVDC equipment following the OSV build-out, and that's of course very much pending what has been the outline from the previous, from the beginning. Is it a 3 or is it 10 gigawatt? That's the plan. And then an innovative zone That can be an area on the island that could be dedicated for innovative energy use. It could be power to X, storage, data centers, etc. The energy island value proposition includes a greater scaling of offshore wind, saving on power transmission, maximizing the value of offshore wind via optionality in product power to X or electricity, connection of markets via interconnectors, and sectors via power to X. Finally, there's of course local job creation, and it boosts the economic growth. The Venø Consortium is composed of 3 investors. It's 2 of the largest pension funds in Denmark, Pension Denmark and PFA, and the largest utility in Denmark, Andel. In addition, Nykredit, one of the largest financial institutions in Denmark, has been selected as a preferred debt partner, and it is expected to provide part of the debt financing via issuing Danish mortgage bonds. In the fall of last year, the Venø Consortium entered into agreement with Njord Group, a best-in-class global EPC contractor composed of 4 renowned companies within marine and offshore construction: Deme, Boskalis, Asiona, and MT Højgaard. The consortium is managed by Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. Njord Group has all the necessary experience and resources, both personal and equipment, to tackle the most ambitious marine infrastructure work. In combined numbers, the Njord Group comprise over 50,000 employees, over 800 vessels, and has a turnover of 12 billion euro. Equipment includes inclusive dredging and reclamation equipment, floating docks for caisson construction, offshore installation vessels, transport and towing capacity. And you can see there's also a number of reference projects, container terminal port in Spain, port expansion in Bornholm, and 2 artificial islands. I will now show you a visualization of how the energy island could be realized, made by engineering house Comm2B, who is engaged as our owner's engineer. However, it is important to note that design and construction methods are not yet decided, and optimal configuration still being developed. And that also referring a bit to previous comments from the presenters. Offshore wind is expected to play a key role in the future generation of renewable energy across the globe, and the market potential is significant. Despite the significant developments in offshore wind technology over the past 2 decades, global potential remains largely untapped. Installed capacity expected to reach 1,400 gigawatt by 2050 from the current 35 gigawatt. As part of the EU offshore renewable strategy, the European Commission has set a target of 300 gigawatt offshore wind by 2050. In order to harvest this potential, the island concept is the most cost-efficient solution to integrate large-scale offshore wind into energy systems. Looking beyond the Danish project, the energy island concept holds strong export potential. It can be applied to several other regions across the globe, including Belgium, which has recently raised its 2030 offshore wind target. CIP views 2 specific regions having attractive fundamentals for energy island solutions: North Sea and Asia. That was all from me. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to share CIP's view, and looking forward to the debate.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing CIP's perspectives on the energy island concept. Looks very promising indeed. Before we move on to the 4th and final presentation, I would like to remind you to go once more to slido.com using the code 243208 and ask any questions that you have for one of our panelists, and also fill in the word cloud what an energy island could mean for you in one word. After these presentations, I'm sure you've had some inspiration. Our final speaker has a warm connection to Scandinavia, as her life motto is, "There is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing." Federal Minister Tine van der Straten has a degree in African languages and cultures, after which she joined law school and established a law firm specialized in climate and energy law. She has been politically active for Groen since 2002, and she is the Federal Minister for Energy since 2020, with a very ambitious program for renewable energy. Unfortunately, Minister van der Straten has been called away to the Parliament, but luckily she took the time yesterday to give us a presentation. So we'll now watch the presentation provided by Minister van der Straten.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, today we are living through a global energy and climate crisis. A combination of an economic boost after COVID-19, geopolitical tension, and a massive failure of old French nuclear power plants. This makes energy prices spike for households and enterprises. In times of distress and uncertainty, there are 3 reactions possible. The first one is flee. Flee from our responsibility to tackle climate change. Postpone our ambition for reduction of CO2 emissions. A second reaction is freeze. Don't act. Halt investments. Wait what the market will do. That's a waste of precious time we simply don't have. And a third reaction is fight. And that's what we should do in order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. As policy leaders, we need to act now, but not alone. The energy transition needs to be a managed transition in the years to come, with both action from governments and regulatory authorities, action from decisive political leaders, and engagement from all countries, big and small, cooperation also between countries. Governments across Europe are taking short-time action to relieve the heaviest burden on the energy bill. And this is very necessary, but we have to admit this is a painkiller. We need a stronger response, a vaccine. We need to invest today in the energy of tomorrow. Renewable energy, energy efficiency. We need to implement the Green Deal, the European strategy to become climate neutral by 2050. And this is what this session is about offshore wind and about artificial energy islands. Belgium is a world leader in offshore wind energy. In 10 years' time, we have become the 2nd largest offshore wind energy producer per inhabitant in the world. And we are a global leader in this technology. We have recently decided to triple our offshore wind to a total capacity of maximum 5.8 gigawatts. And this means that in the new Princess Elisabeth zone, we will develop 3.1 gigawatt to 3.5 gigawatt of wind capacity. And this is in line with heightened European climate ambitions, advances also in technology and progressive insights. Clearly, this is an ambitious target, and we will need to address technical complexities, how to achieve this in a relatively small area. But the target set by the government, a stable regulatory framework, together with the entrepreneurial spirit, will do the job. And there is simply no other way. To move towards a climate-neutral energy system, we need renewable energy in large quantities. And for Belgium, this means investments in offshore wind energy. And these investments in renewable energy will protect us from price hikes we see today. The North Sea has the capacity to become the biggest sustainable power plant. And this ambition will be a game changer, because we need to rethink how we plan offshore wind parks, how we connect them to each other and also to land, because we will be sharing the electricity across Europe. Energy islands will be a crucial next step. I talked about capacity increase in our own Princess Elisabeth zone. Every Belgian household will be supplied by green electricity generated in the North Sea by 2030. And this increase is possible thanks to the very first offshore energy island in the North Sea. It is one of our investments in energy infrastructure for the future. It is also part of the post-COVID-19 recovery plan. It will be designed and built between now and 2026. And this offshore energy island has the potential to provide the grid connection for the 3.5 gigawatts of energy production from the Princess Elisabeth zone. And also, on top of that, to realize interconnections. And this hybrid combination allows us to be efficient in grid planning. We don't need additional grid reinforcement on land. At this moment in time, we are finalizing the grid design. This was approved by the federal government before Christmas, and we are awaiting now the advice of the Council of State. In 2022, so this year, a full environmental impact assessment will be performed to map the environmental impact of the energy island and provide mitigation measures where needed. Our island, it will be the first, but not the last. Our Belgian industries have a large demand for green electricity, which we cannot produce on our own. And therefore, we joined forces with Denmark. Last November, my Danish colleague Dan Jurgensen and I, we signed a memorandum of agreement in Copenhagen, and it should lead to the construction of an undersea electricity connection between our two countries. It will be called the Triton Link, and it is named after the King of the Sea. This project is also a world first. It's an undersea connection between two artificial energy islands in the North Sea, and it will bring the energy from wind farms ashore, a project that will share wind surpluses generated in Denmark with Belgian households and Belgian industries. We worked hard the last year on a preliminary study, and the findings show that the project is both socio-economically and technically feasible. It will lead to significant CO2 reductions at European level, an annual reduction of 4 megatons of CO2. This is the emission of about 1.2 million passenger cars. Hybrid interconnectors, to which both own wind farms and foreign ones can be connected, are important building blocks to connect European wind farms to build this meshed grid. A meshed grid that will be the cornerstone of the European ambition to fully decarbonize energy systems. The next years will be about how to integrate bulk renewables in the European electricity system, and it will also be about grid stabilization. And energy islands, as well as hybrid interconnectors, will be pivotal. We, as a country, Belgium, we pioneered in offshore wind 20 years ago, and we are pioneering today again. And such innovations are crucial to turn the North Sea into one big renewable energy plant, to have access to large amounts of cheap renewable energy, much needed for electrification of transport and heating, and to decarbonize our energy-intensive industry, and also to meet European climate targets. Wind at sea is one of the cheapest ways of producing energy, Wind power is falling sharply in price and will have a positive effect on the price for consumers. Innovative infrastructures like energy islands will further increase the security of supply. The Belgian energy island and the Belgian-Danish interconnection are a historic and ambitious step on the road to phasing out fossil fuels. The global energy and climate crisis should force us to accelerate towards 100% renewable energy and climate neutrality instead of slowing us down. Yes, these times they are challenging. Some would say the roaring 20s. But to quote Seneca, if one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. Our destination is clear. It's carbon neutrality by 2050. Our destination is to address climate change. And yes, the water can be rough, and it will be from time to time. And then what you need is experienced and calm helmsmen. The combination of a clear policy vision and the ambition of the wind industry will guide us, and it will allow us to push borders. What's good for the climate is good for the economy and for society as a whole. I thank you all for listening, and I hope we will meet in real life as soon as possible.
Thank you, Minister van der Straten, for this very insightful speech and also to share the position of an energy island in Belgian waters within the broader energy transition policy. Welcome again, you at home or at the office. Please stay tuned in, because now we go to the interactive part, for which I have the honor to guide you through it. I can see here on the screen that several people have put their one word of what they think of for an energy island. May I ask the technical people to screen it also for the people at home? There it is. I can see a very interesting and different words, so we can see that it's very broad. And I would like to invite the panelists, of which we know already 3 of them, because they had the presentation. And I would like to introduce you to Mrs. Anne Stroobant, who is Deputy Head of Cabinet of the Minister and also Head of the Energy Policy Staff. So welcome, Anne. Welcome to the other panelists. Maybe we can start with Anne. What would be your single word if you think of an energy island?
I had future in mind, and I see I'm not the only one. It's for me part of the energy vision and the target to come to climate neutrality, and it's a crucial part to harvest the energy of the North Sea for the whole of Europe. Okay, future-proof. That's a very interesting point. I think we will come back to that. Jan?
My word would be flexibility, because if we want to move to a renewable energy dominant electricity system, we need more flexibility. That's what we see now with the energy price crisis. We need to be more flexible than we are with the other means like nuclear, gas, and so forth. And so that requires new infrastructure, new habits, pricing, all of that. Flexibility is really what it's about. And that island, or those islands, artificial islands, can help in stabilizing and bringing the electricity of the offshore wind to the people at the time when they really need it. And that's really what we need to learn.
Okay, flexibility. I think we come back to that. We can refer to your Swiss knife in a minute. Timothy?
I like the idea of flexibility as well, but I tend to look more at this over time. How could an energy island at its conception or its construction could be flexible over the upcoming 50, 80 years? But I tend to go for opportunities.
Okay.
There is possibilities there, so I took another word.
Opportunities, flexibility, but another vision on flexibility. Somehow it's not restrained to energy, so very interesting. Then I have the honor to invite also Michael to have his word.
I will take the liberty to combine 2 words, opportunity and necessity. And I think opportunity has been covered already, but I think if we really want to electrify the society and want to decarbonize, there's no other opportunity. You had to have so much electricity in the future, and that can only happen by doing large-scale offshore.
Okay, that's 2 words, but okay, we forgive you. Thank you.
Necessity will be the
Thank you for
dominant
this.
domain.
Thank you for this. I have to invite also the people at home to answer the questions. So please do so as soon as the questions are available in Slido. So the code is 243208. Please don't hesitate to join in if you haven't so far, and answer as quickly as you can, because we will use your answers also to bring this in the debate with our panelists here in Brussels. Okay, let's get started with the first question. Why do we talk about energy islands and not about blue economy islands? Jan, that's maybe one for you. As you discussed very briefly the idea of multi-use and whether it would be interesting or not. Jan.
Yes, it's indeed a very good question. And as said, for me, when you look at the different value streams and value propositions that can be combined in such an island, indeed we can look further than energy. Now, I'm coming from the energy world. I'm looking, and I believe in bringing renewables to all and having almost 100% renewable energy system. So I'm looking how we can make that happen. Because if you look at the Fit for 55 package and the climate law in Europe, where we want to become climate neutral, basically it means electrifying our cars, electrifying the heating of our homes, electrifying or making molecules, renewable powered fuels for industry, for the steel that we make and the plastics that we make and everything. So it's a giant task. Already that, can keep us very busy. So I'm focused on that. I'm not saying there's not no other uses. It can be tourism, it can be aquaculture, it can be services and so forth. But in the end, I think, the first reason to do it, and we shouldn't lose sight on that, and I don't think anyone does, but the first reason to do it is really installing a space for bringing the power of the offshore wind together, bringing it to the shore, and contributing to the stabilization of that offshore wind energy with some storage. I think that's the core proposition. And then we can look if it's for stakeholders, for economic, for social reasons of added value, we can look at other functions. I'm not against that. But okay, we always have to think these other functions, can we not do them also elsewhere? There are islands in Europe, there are more than 2,000 islands in Europe. You want to visit an island? You can. You don't need to make an artificial island in Europe to visit an island. There's many. And some of these islands would really want some people to visit them. So tourism you can do also elsewhere. Aquaculture, there's many places. Is it the best place? I don't know. It's empirical. We need to look at it.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very insightful. So I would say that you rather would start with an Opinel and then later on you could go for the full Swift night.
Exactly. Start with a very good energy island, a pure energy island, and then consider what can be added as useful that elsewhere would be less of interest or value. If we go back to our public that is following, then we can see that it's clearly like 80% saying, well, we should do more than only energy. Maybe Timothy, you can add on this.
I will definitely. But I've got a question for Denmark, if I may.
Okay,
first, I'm sorry to take over your role.
My role. You want the mic?
No, I don't want the mic. I'll do this only once. If I see the result, and to be honest, I like the proposal you shared with us. I see a different point of view. So I was wondering but maybe I'm now raising your question. Afterwards, I'll give my answer. Is how did you end up? Let's say, because you clearly come with a blue economy island. That's at least what I see in the images.
Yeah, let me take you on the road then, because I think it started in Denmark by saying that we have to solve the problem of the not in my backyard. Mm. It's a large-scale wind parks. It should not be in my backyard, so we need to cluster it somewhere, and it has to be a certain distance from shore. And the area in the North Sea we're looking at, that's 100 kilometer plus from shore. Mm. I think that's an important point. Then the discussion in Parliament was about when that was decided summer 2020 that it should start with 3 gigawatt. But then as part of the Finance Act done in December last year, it was decided it should be built so it could cover the full 10 gigawatt. And then it has been decided as well it should be innovative activities on the island to be defined. And that's also what you pointed at your presentation. It's absolutely uncertain what makes sense and what should not make sense. I think what we have seen is that we have been in a dialogue with a number of market operators within different sectors and industries over the last couple of years. And from the market, there's a drive to get activities on the island. But then we're also back to what kind of regulation do you have at the island and what is possible and what will be accepted. So I think that's where Denmark comes from. It has been decided we want to have 10 gigawatt connected. It has been decided that we want to have innovative activities. Should be decided. But we also need a regulatory framework about what is possible.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, thank you, Timothy, for asking this question. it actually points very nicely out that, well, it's very different, the approach of Denmark as compared to Belgium. And this brings us to the second question. But before we go to the second question, may I ask also to go to the third question at home and already answered, and we have your answers already for the third question. And the second question would be, Anne, that's maybe one for you, as it really related to the answer of Michael. What would be the basic system function in the long run of this island, and why is it that Belgium actually chose to have only this energy transformation function?
Yeah. Because I think we have a bit of a different approach, and I think we should also consider, of course, the larger we make the energy island, the more impact it will also have on the bottom of the sea, on sea life, on nature preservation, which we should also not forget. So what we put on the island and the surface we create there should really be of an added value. So we could have said, okay, we make it larger and we invest a bit more, but then we need to make sure that the activities are actually having an added value. On top of that, you also create a certain amount of complexity, both on a regulatory frame, on a business investment decision. And of course, we had the situation that we do want to connect the Princess Elisabeth zone, and we are in a strict timeline. It also coincided with the timelines of the recovery plan, so we also introduced it in the recovery plan, which means that we will build the island in 2026, so a very strict target. And it's also one of the reasons why we said, okay, we focus now, we will do what we need to do on the island. We will see, can we integrate a bit other activities that don't require a lot of surface, but there are possibilities of optimizations. But let's focus, let's act now, let's get the experience, and let's get built and not keep on studying and studying while we find the exact optimum solution, but we lose 5 years' time,
okay.
basically.
So that's very much in line with the analysis we heard from Jan before. Yeah. Timothy, do you think we will lose some opportunities by actually saying, okay, we start there with one function and then we add on? Is that a problem also stakeholder-wise?
Let's say I can imagine. Of course, I don't have a glass ball, but I can imagine, let's say, but it's from my point of view and with the limited information I have, which has been shared here. I follow your concerns. I tend to lean more to the approach that was shown by our by Denmark, let's say. Yeah, what I would, let's say, from intuitively and from the experience that I have with these large-scale projects, I think I would have introduced or added another study step, not a study step that would take us another 5 years, let's say, but maybe a smaller research, a small co-creation process of a few months, six months, half a year, I don't know, to indeed study the possibilities of what could it become more than this necessary island. And maybe from the larger perspective, if you look at the North Sea, let's say within 30 to 50, 60 years, are we looking at a sea fully occupied with monofunctional objects, or would we like to set now the first step to to create a fully integrated North Sea energy system, integrated with all the other activities imaginable, so that not only we have a functioning system, but that we leave open and free space for our future generations to let's say, enjoy what is left.
Okay, so you would need to build in some options, but I see that Anne wants to...
Just quickly, because there was a process of several months where we actually did the exercise, gather other ideas, but to come to a concrete plan where it actually is proven more or less that it makes sense, that step was very difficult to make at that time. So we will still have the discussions, but for activities requiring a smaller amount. I do want to add that it is because of the island that we were in the possibility to increase the capacity for the offshore wind site from 2.1 to a maximum of 3.5, for which a very nice study was made. But the energy island made that possible to increase the capacity, which adds a lot of added value for the Belgian society, because we have a shortage of renewable energy. So there is a large added value now of that energy island by combining those activities, at least, creating access for all Belgians towards renewable energy.
Which explains actually the primary energy function of the island. Timothy.
Yeah, I would like to get back to the first question and give my answer, because it relates to what has just been said. So let's say the objective of our office is to help necessary projects getting realized. So I'm not pleading for it should be multifunctional. My plea is, let's say, referring to this research done by Hertog, that big projects do not get realized because of lack of public support. With that in mind, we tend to go for co-creative processes if they could help to get them realized. So my plea is not they should be multifunctional, but let's say my idealistic point of view, the Timothy, not the professional one, would say let's go for an integrated approach for the future.
Okay. Nice to have two Timothys here. And a moderator Timothy makes three Timothys. Thank you.
Correct.
Maybe you can go...
Can I just make
yes.
one remark as well? I think the analysis that were made in Denmark before they was taking a decision about the energy island, that was that there would be a break-even, and it was also mentioned by you at around 3 gigawatt. That is, you can either build artificial island, you could do it all on a more traditional way. And I think the support the politician has shown this project by saying that it should be facilitated so it can host up to 10 gigawatt. That's the only way to scale it, because when you go to the environmental impact assessment and all that, if you do a 3 gigawatt island, there's no really obvious advantage by doing that, but it also takes a very long time to come with project number 2. And so I think from a Danish perspective, and I don't know whether there's any particular issues in Belgium, but from a Danish perspective, I think that's really the best thing that's happened. And of course, then it's a question whether it's hydrogen or whether it's electricity that will be exported. But from a society point of view, hydrogen makes a lot of value because it's much more cheaper to transport.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So in the end, the reasoning is not very different. Denmark as compared to Belgium. It's actually the energy capacity that drives us towards building these artificial islands. And in the meantime, I can see on the screen that we have some answers on the third question, which is very much related because we already touched upon it. It's these soft functions, which would be like the less profitable functions. Can we add them? Should we add them? And which ones? And there we can see that it's basically nature and innovation that is in the top score here for our public at home. Tourism has a very low score, maybe because of the comments already by Jan. They were inspired. Then we have also almost 20% of people that think of other activities out there. So. Also there, I think it might be interesting to elaborate a little bit, especially maybe on the environmental point of view. Can we actually create some nature value there, Anne? What would be your opinion on that?
Well, I would say also in the recovery plan, we actually dedicated €1 million out of the total 100 for the energy island, dedicated to biodiversity projects and nature inclusive additional projects linked to the energy island. So we would welcome all ideas in that regard.
Okay, and then the other part of environment is not only the direct environmental impact, but also the life cycle analysis. Jan, you elaborate a little bit in your presentation. What would you propose for the Belgian island? Is it feasible to have it fully CO2 neutral or recyclable?
Well, it's not easy, because we're seeing that all over Europe at the moment. The quest for low carbon steel, and in the European Innovation Fund, which is funded with the emission allowances, a big project in Sweden will be financed to create low carbon steel. And for instance, all the automobile manufacturers, Volvo and others, are already lining up and say we want low carbon steel for our cars, because if you make electric vehicles, because it's an environmental proposition, you also want the car itself to be an environmental proposition. And that's actually showing where we are heading. I mean, the infrastructure is there to serve people having access to affordable and sustainable energy. But the infrastructure itself, all the materials that going into it, at the same time, we want them to be also sustainable. And we might actually need for that hydrogen, which then squares the circle, because the hydrogen will be made, at least in Europe, with offshore wind. I mean, the only competitive hydrogen I can imagine in Europe is coming from the offshore wind. And then the question becomes, where do you make that hydrogen? Do you make it on shore with the electricity coming from an artificial island and the offshore wind parks around? Do you make the hydrogen actually on that island for a bit and then transport it to the shore? Those are questions that we need to look at. But we know that we need the offshore wind, we need the hydrogen to make the materials low carbon that is going into all that infrastructure. So I think it's a multi-challenge, and it's exciting. I mean, it's what a time to be alive, This is all happening. There's a lot of innovation going on. So yes, let's experiment. But let's also, keep a look at on the other side. It's exciting, but it's also difficult. We see at the moment many families are struggling with high energy bills. This cannot be the future. The future has to be affordable. So we have to square all that. And I think it's possible with stakeholders, but also with, calculating, analytics, showing, how this all can fit together and where the demand and the supply of all these low carbon economy is going. So
okay.
That's where I think we can really contribute also with an island.
Challenging but difficult. Thank you, Jan. I think we can go to the next question. Before we do that, I come to you, Timothy. I want to invite people following us to already answer to the question after the next one, so that we have your answers to discuss. So thank you to go to Slido and put your answers there. And don't forget that you also can put some questions directly to the panelists if you would like. Then we go to the next question, and I come to you immediately, Timothy. Also there, it's quite related. We had some brief discussions on financial issues, but I think that might be an interesting for Anne and Michael actually to elaborate a little bit what is the financial structure behind, what is the societal cost, as Jan referred to it, who would and should take the profit. I think that's a huge discussion, and there's a lot of questions also in the broader public about these things. Maybe we start with Anne.
I think we have the more simpler case because of the fact it is only energy and transmission activities combining interconnection, hopefully then in the future the cable to Denmark connecting the islands, combined that with the connection for the offshore wind. Elia is the party who is fully responsible. They will do the whole European tendering mechanism. They will take the whole project in hand. Which of course will then go into the tariffs, but it's no different than what they would elsewhere do with the platforms. It is for them actually more efficient to do it in an island, and possibly will create some advantages if we have a future interconnector, because part of that infrastructure will already be in place. So it is future-proof and quite simple in terms of financial structure.
Okay, the last remark is an interesting one, and we will come back to this during this panel discussion. But first, Michael.
Yeah, it's not that simple. The total complex of building a wind park around an energy island has been estimated to be 30 billion euro. Out of that, the island itself is 1 to 1.5 billion. So it's a small fraction of the total amount, but it's the complexity around it. The consortium that's behind our project, they have said they are ready to finance the full energy island with the aim of having activities on the island, meaning the use of either by connecting energy to the island, you have to pay a usage fee. However, the state has decided they want to have 51% ownership of the island. And then we are going in, of course, to what kind of revenue model, risk-sharing model, and we don't know yet what the state is pursuing. But we have said we are ready to actually take care of the full chain as private investors. So that could be securing that there'll be the necessary wind, but also the necessary infrastructure and even producing hydrogen. But of course, that's an assessment, risk-adjusted assessment. How can you do that? But that's the idea behind what we have proposed.
Okay, very ambitious.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jan wanted to react.
Yeah, I just want to add something to it with a bit of an anecdote. Almost 20 years ago, I made a study on the economics of offshore wind for the UK Department of Trade and Industry. And so I calculated and I looked at the figures and I said, who's going to build this? This is so expensive compared to normal way of creating electricity. And so that was 20 years ago. And then the UK actually didn't. They didn't build it. The Danish started, the Belgians started, the Dutch. And now the UK is catching up when basically all these innovation efforts, all these first deployments, the people working out how we can do this cheaper, the wind turbines that are becoming more economic, all these things have been kickstarted by a small number of small countries. And now we're making competitive renewable offshore wind energy, and now the UK is fully on board with their whole financial capital of London, investing massively in this park. So you see, it's worth pioneering. And it comes at a cost. I mean, the Danish and the Belgian taxpayers have not only morally but financially supported all this a lot. But it brings benefits if you persevere and if you say, okay, in 20 years from now, this will be of value. Let's do this. And so I plead for financial calculus and looking at how it can work. But we also need to make the jump and say, let's do this, and we'll work out. We'll make this happen, and the cost will come down eventually. We need that time perspective also on that. And that's what I learned now 20 years later. If you look at such a study and say, oh, it's expensive, well, think about what will it be in 20 years?
And most importantly, we need front runners. So
exactly.
It might be the same for the energy islands.
Yeah.
So we have the Belgian and the Danish example. So this might trigger something also for other countries. Thank you for this, for sharing this anecdote.
Can
Michael.
you just a small remark? I think coming back to this about if you have an inflection point about 3 gigawatt, where there's an advantage creating large-scale energy islands, then there's a society benefit, and then it's about how you're allocating in the society. The same if you produce hydrogen, it's much cheaper to transport it from offshore. It's 1/5 or 1/10 of transporting power. There's a benefit for society. And then it's about allocation mechanism. Who's going to benefit and take the risk on that?
Yeah.
Yes, but then you need space for your hydrogen plant on the island.
And people.
But then you can discuss what space is taking up. Is it taking up alternative space for HVDC equipment? Probably it is. So maybe it's not a big deal in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Then we will switch to another part of what energy is like. We haven't discussed it right now in full. It's not only about energy production and transformation, but also about energy storage. We touched a little bit on hydrogen. So there the question would be also for the public at home, should energy islands foresee energy storage as well? And also in what way? So there we can see that most people believe that hydrogen might be the future. So this relates to the remark of Michael, that it might also be a cheaper way of transporting it. Batteries, still 30%. Think we should put batteries on the island. and pumped hydro also 20% more or less, and we still have 12% of people that say no, we shouldn't do anything like that, no molecules or no storage. So I think we have a very diverse response here, which is kind of interesting. Who wants to react on that as a first panelist?
I would just like to say something, because in terms of hydrogen production, also one of the reasons why our island is smaller, we have said not to focus on hydrogen production from the offshore wind, because we need the electrons to electrify the society. We need that much more than the hydrogen. And if we produce hydrogen, then there's a large loss of efficiency that goes along. So if you have a lot of overproduction in terms of electricity, it might be a solution, and we do need the hydrogen, but it will not come from our own production. But in that sense, I think also there we are in a specific situation. So I just want to make that quite clear, that we did make a very conscious choice about not producing hydrogen on the island.
Okay, so that's the electricity policy. We need the electricity, so why would we transform it? Okay, that's clear. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, if I look at the options, hydrogen, batteries, pumped hydro, well, we need all of it. We need a lot of flexibility. We need all of it, and the question is where. And if I start from the pumped hydro, I mean, this is actually one of the cheapest ways of balancing the intermittency of solar and wind. The problem is, I mean, can you imagine right now in Europe on land to inundate a valley or a piece of hills or mountains with a new lake to do the pumped hydro? That's a question of stakeholders and a question of public acceptance. You know, the public acceptance for inundating pieces of land and pieces of nature in Europe is not so great at the moment. And it's unfortunate for the energy system, but we have to accept it, because nature is also scarce in Europe, and we're not like other countries, for instance China, and saying, okay, we do this big infrastructure, and okay, that's the consequence we take. So pumped hydro, yes. So we have to, I think, look again. Perhaps there's a function there at sea. Last time we calculated, it wasn't beneficial, but perhaps moving on with the prices that we know now, it might become. Batteries, a lot of it, but I think the biggest capacity of batteries will be people's cars. And the flexible use of it, the charging at the right time, during midday when there's a lot of sun, during the night when there's a lot of wind, and this has all to become automatic. So I think batteries, and for that you need to bring the power from the sea to the shore and feed it to all these decentralized batteries. That's, I think, the main system there. And with the coming of EV, I think we're getting there. So that leaves hydrogen, and it's a question of deciding onshore, offshore, where's the best place of production. I mean, the Danish sea is a lot bigger, 100 kilometers, a lot further in the sea than if we look at the Belgian North Sea, where basically you're looking at 10 kilometers or in that, in the tens, not in the hundreds. So that's where that's where you need to make a decision. But we need all of it. I'm sure of it, and we need to learn, because if you look at the fossil system, and there's a lot of problems with that, but we learned globally, to use the cheapest oil, cheapest gas, and so forth, and that leads us sometimes to places where you would not have wanted to be. But okay, it's cheap oil and gas, and it fueled our economy. For renewables, we need to do the same. We need, we've experimented, we've developed the first generation, but now we need to go to the cheapest. If we want people to electrify their homes, their cars, and all the materials they use, it has to be cheap, because otherwise it won't be affordable for the Europeans, and it's definitely not for the rest of the world. So it has to be where it's cheapest, and that's where we need to make the connections, the electrical cables, the hydrogen pipelines, all the infrastructure that we need. And that indeed, I think in Belgium, and I think it's a choice, and it's a reasonable choice to say we will not produce hydrogen at sea. If we produce hydrogen, it's on the shore. We can cable it, the electricity to the shore, and we'll do it there. Okay, good. If that is the way we can make competitive hydrogen, let's do it.
Michael, what is your opinion? Do we need it all, and do we need it all on the island?
It's very complex because it's also about how you scale your activities at the island, what kind of activities you have at the island. If you start with 3 gigawatt of wind production and it's go with one single exit point into other beginning of Denmark, storage probably is a good idea because you can optimize the use of the pipeline system. But the more optionality you had on the island, more exit points, more production, hydrogen, electricity, potential other activities on the island, the less value you get out of storage. So it's about how you're ramping up on your wind and what kind of activities you have for day one at the island. I think on the energy island we have done several business cases and I think there'll be a case for maybe a small storage, but we also on the other hand believe there'll be several export routes for the electricity, probably several production activities, and that's dilute the value of storage.
Okay.
I do not believe, if that's also embedded in the question there, that hydrogen as a storage, meaning going back to electricity again. I think that's the loss is too big. Yep. So then it's hydrogen for export, not for storage.
Okay, that's quite clear. Before we go to the next question, I want to invite Timothy because he wanted to still say something, and I forgot to give you the floor. So what was it that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, it was rather a question. And again, what can we learn from Denmark? Because Jan raised something interesting, the idea of circularity, etc. And how can we translate this idea of sustainability fully into the entire project? So I was wondering if we look at the island from the construction point of view, and in the end even on decommissioning, etc. How did Denmark take this, or the Vindenerland take this into account, and maybe even in 80 years from now, how will decommissioning look like, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a point on the agenda for the state in the tender release. How to that should be part of the tender to live up to some ESG requirements, but it's a difficult measurement to be honest. I think it's one of the things we will work closely with our partners, Nord Group, DEMA, etc., to figure out how can we make the best proposal there. It's top of our agenda.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think this is very much related to the last question. So thank you, Timothy, for introducing it. It is about how can we make these islands future-proof? Should we go for a modular system? Anne mentioned also we should have this extra capacity, maybe to share electricity. Is that feasible from a financial point of view? How can we make it future-proof? And in the first place, how do you foresee it for the Belgium case and you in the Danish case? I think this is something that's very interesting. Can we add on later on? Is there some design already thought of to make this happen in the future, or is this too complex? Anne?
I would say we focus now on the 5 acres net surface that we have and getting that done. The future-proof part is in the way how electrical-wise it is connected, because we have 2.1 gigawatts will be connected via AC, normal alternative current, and 1.4 gigawatts via direct current, which means that 1.4 gigawatt can also be used for an interconnector from Denmark, from the UK to the island, where this infrastructure and the cabling towards shore is already used. And also importantly, we do not need to reinforce then the onshore grid for the next interconnector coming from the UK, for example. We use the existing infrastructure, the existing capacities which are planned and which are projects who also are not that easy to build new cable lines through Belgium. It also creates quite some questions and stakeholder management. But we are using all that infrastructure much more efficiently in the design that we are bringing. So in that sense, we build it future-proof.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Michael first and then Jan.
On the modular approach, I think I have touched upon it beforehand. I do not see it. I think if you're building a 3 gigawatt, collecting 3 gigawatt it should maybe necessarily not be an island, artificial island, because you're not benefiting from it. And it's very much also related to how fast do you build out your offshore wind. Because of course you should not build a big island if you only have 3 gigawatt of wind connected. So you need the foresight for when you're actually connecting the coming gigawatt. So I think, but I think modular approach, and that's of course part of you have to talk to EPC consort about can that make sense, and how does it impact environment, etc.
Yes, but there's also the chicken and the egg, because it's also if the island is not ready, they won't build any.
Exactly, and that's the reason why Denmark has decided that by 2040 the island should be ready to take 10 gigawatts of wind. So that's a clear signal.
Okay, Jan.
Yes, I wanted to bring in the value of learning. Because if we're thinking about steps, modular or small and scaling up and so forth, it's really the value of learning that determines it. And if I go back to my example of the offshore wind, which I calculated back in 2002, what I underestimated then was the value of learning, how fast we would learn to make these things cheap. And that's a reason to start with something, but it's also a reason to perhaps do different functions at a time and concentrate on the learning we can get from them. And so indeed, if we now develop the offshore wind and learning how this interconnection throughout the whole of Europe and the North Sea can work, that's valuable. Let's do that. Let's start with it. Let's not wait, because there's learning to be had in the next years. And then perhaps with other functions we can add the modular. But we have to be, because modular is one of these fashionable words that are out there now, whether it's for nuclear or for buildings or for everything's modular. But modular doesn't make the problems go away. It's a question.
It comes with the cost.
And it comes with the cost. So you have to see, what am I really looking at? And if I integrate learning into my scaling, where could I land? And then it might be worthwhile to start with bigger scales than with lower. I take the example of hydrogen. You can say, okay, let's start with 2 megawatt, but we won't learn much from 2 megawatt at the moment, because that we already know. We can only learn from higher capacities right now. So you have to be willing then to say, let's go in with immediately a big capacity, because that's where the learning is. So it is an important question to be had, and I think it pleads for let's go with what we already need and then build on that for later.
It's a very interesting view. That's basically what we try to do with the Blue Cluster, also on non-energy issues. But also, Timothy, maybe you can elaborate on this learning phase from a stakeholder point of view, and the values and the SOLVE program you have.
I had a phrase in mind, but could you rephrase your question, please?
Well, if Jan actually says, well, we have this learning phase, but we have to actually calculate this also in financial broadcasts to see what how we can actually gain from it. Can we also include non-financial and non-technical issues from your experience in this calculation? Let's say if you follow the rationale or the logic of the presentation I gave earlier, I think it might be necessary to include it to get your project realized. But I follow. Let's say I see there are a lot of challenges, and maybe it has to do as well with possibilities that Belgium has compared to Denmark or vice versa. What I'm let's say now interested in is I'm now let's say I'm looking at these islands now, or the island that is to be built, as I understand it from the information I get now. I see it as a more or less a fixed object that can become more and more efficiently, let's say, within its boundaries. But I'm wondering now, but maybe it's more or less a personal interest, is what kind of procedures or spatial procedures, etc., surround these projects to allow them to grow over time if further efficiency isn't possible anymore.
let's say, maybe raises or goes back to the idea of flexibility over time.
Okay.
And let's say integrating it within the construction is one thing, but how do you surround it from, let's say, the government point of view? But I'm raising another question, sorry, madam.
You really want the mic. Thank you, Timothy. I think we have still 6 minutes or 7 minutes or so, and maybe we should go to the questions of the public. And I would like to tackle some of the questions, and each time one panelist, so then we can take more questions, if that's fine for you. So the first question I see there is what do the panelists consider to be the biggest technical challenges for scaling up renewables through energy islands? Who wants to take this one? Michael.
At least I have a view on it, because it's not only a technical challenge, but I'll come back to that as well. But I think I actually touched upon also about the number of stakeholders, because it's extremely complex to get everything rolled out in one go, because you need to be sure you can construct an island, you need to be sure you have the necessary infrastructure in place, you need to be sure you get tendered the necessary wind, so it all have to come in one go. That's extremely complex. Coming back to the technical challenge, but that's pending what you want to get on the island. I think constructing the energy island as such, known technologies, you need to put it together, you need to find the right approach. That's not a technical challenge, but of course, if you want to do big scale hydrogen production, there's an issue about how much electrolyzer do you have in the world, and where is the capacity going, and what is the timing.
Okay, thank you. Take the next question. To what extent the EU green taxonomy indicators or the future indicators can help for the investment and for the unlocking of the full potential of energy islands? Jan.
Yes, I could respond to that. And I did already in my presentation, but more technical. So the EU green taxonomy is basically defining what is a sustainable activity. And it does so by saying you have to contribute to one of 6 environmental indicators, of which climate change mitigation is one. Climate change adaptation is also another. Also, energy islands could work there. But, and that is important in this context, you cannot do substantial harm to any of the others. So you cannot save the climate at the detriment of, say, biodiversity, the management of oceans. And this is important here. I think if this will become under scrutiny, CIP will want to finance this and go to the market and say we've got an ESG aligned, a taxonomy aligned bond, and you can write up for that, then it will have to show we are contributing to climate change mitigation and we're not doing substantial harm to marine biodiversity. You will have to show it. And obviously it is within measures, I mean it's all reasonable, but you have to show it, address it, you cannot hide it under the carpet. Otherwise, you cannot call it sustainable. And I think for such a project, you would want to be able to call it sustainable. Otherwise, I think you're creating, what are you creating then? So it's, I think the taxonomy helps in purifying the reflection of all the other facets that are out there. So I think it's a very good question, and I'm looking forward to the answers actually.
Yeah, so it's complex as we have to go technology-wise in one go, but actually policy-wise, it's the same. It's the same
finance-wise, because there's a lot of money waiting to be spent. I mean, this is. I mean, when you talk to financiers, they're saying, "Well, the money is there. Where are the projects?" Well, this is a project, but does it fit the indicators, the criteria? That's now what will need to be shown, and I think it's very important that it's shown to be sustainable.
Okay.
We cannot greenwash energy islands.
Okay, great. We have a lot of questions. I would like to have some more. Well, how does the energy island relate to Belgium's import strategy for energy? I think that's one for Anne.
Yeah. Well, for us, it's actually one of the reasons why we are doing it, because we need renewable electricity. We will not be able to produce all ourselves. That's simply reality. So it is designed to also act as an interconnection point, so we can connect more interconnectors on the island. Of course, then we need to have the cables bringing it to the consumers, which still we need to work out in the future. But it is part of that import strategy. Of course, we also have an import strategy on hydrogen, but let's see, perhaps we should not only build an interconnector with Denmark, perhaps we should also build a pipeline to Denmark. So let's see where it brings, but also hydrogen, we will depend on import, but let's make sure that we get it secured from different sources, from the places where it is more cheap to do so, where we need to start now.
New ideas, new propositions to collaborate. Great. Thank you. Maybe one last question that maybe one for Timothy. If there is limited multi-use on the island, what is then the advantage of an energy island versus offshore wind farms?
I'd rather pass this question to our specialists here.
Okay.
No, but I think that's probably linking to the Belgian island. I don't know.
But if I can answer for the DC part, for example, you cannot just simply put it on a platform. It requires quite some space. So if you build that interconnection concept with an AC/DC converter station offshore, that's where you need the island and a bit more firm infrastructure, which also is more cheaper than the alternative.
Part of the answer is also not all energy islands will be the same.
No.
Same with natural islands. There's over 2,000 in Europe. There's big ones, small ones, volcanic ones, and others. So we can design for purpose in the situation where they are in. And that might not be the same far in the North Sea than closer to the shore, might not be the same in the South China Sea or the seas around Japan. I mean, you have to look at what is the geology, what is the marine environment and so forth. It's not, energy islands will come in varieties. And so each time you need to make the reflection.
Okay. Thank you. I come back to you, Anne, because there we have a question on public acceptance. I think Timothy can elaborate on this one. Would it be an option by the Belgian government not limiting the buy-in from the citizens by actually multi-use, by introducing multi-use, because this would enhance public acceptance? That's what one of the one person in the audience is saying. What is your thoughts about it?
We would greatly accept the invitation, I would say.
Okay, thank you for this short answer. Very clear. Anne,
may I just
please
add, because I think it's something we should discuss with area, look at possibilities. Of course, we are regulatory speaking quite limited, but what we do want to do is get involvement of the participants in the offshore wind farms, in the actual producing of the renewable energy. We will launch a tender mechanism, and our goal is that we include citizen participation in that, citizen ownership of the turbines even, so that we really can offer all Belgian citizens the possibilities to co-invest, the possibilities to co-own renewable energy, and to make sure that you assure your own energy provision in the future.
Okay. Great. Well, I have the feeling that we can take also this afternoon to continue, because there's questions coming up from the public at home, at the home offices, but also here. There's lots of ideas that have been shared, for which we are, of course, very grateful. I think this is the beginning of the debate. I think we had a very nice contributors here today, which I want to thank. I want to thank you also for tuning in, for having these questions out. And for us, it's really just the start, which was also the objective, open the debate. We have lots of ideas that we have harvested, and I hope we can continue this discussion very, very soon. And of course, I hope also that we meet again in real life, as we are lucky here in Brussels, or virtually, as we are as we are joining you for this session. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you soon. Bye.